You're listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service with me, James Copnell. President Trump is no stranger to fact-checkers. But in the last few hours, the president has faced urgent clarifications and information health warnings from two very high-profile sources. First, Twitter issued a disclaimer to alert users that one of Mr. Trump's tweets represented misleading and potentially harmful information. And then the top government scientist, Anthony Fauci, said an ad by the Trump campaign had been doctored to make it sound like he was endorsing the president's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Dr. Fauci's is the second voice you'll hear in this clip from the ad.
President Trump tackled the virus head-on, as leaders should.
I can't imagine that anybody could be doing more.
We'll get through this together. We'll live carefully, but not afraid.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
A short while ago, I asked our US correspondent, Peter Bowes, what exactly Dr. Fauci was objecting to.
Well, Dr. Fauci has said that he did not agree to be featured in that ad and that his comments were taken out of context. The remarks that we just heard that sound like he is praising the president were made in March in an interview in which he says he was discussing the broader coronavirus effort, including the work of the White House task force. He said in his nearly 5 decades of public service, he's never publicly endorsed any political candidate. Now, the Trump campaign has defended its position on this, saying that the words used were Dr. Fauci's and that they were accurate and that they were praising the Trump administration.
Not just Dr. Fauci. Twitter also acting in response to one of the president's tweets. What exactly has the social media site done?
Yeah, Twitter has added a disclaimer to another of the president's tweets to alert its users that the tweet may represent misleading and potentially harmful information related to coronavirus. The tweet is hidden, but it's not blocked. You can click through having seen the warning. And in it, President Trump claims that he has had a total and complete sign-off from White House doctors. This was on Saturday, when the doctors last issued a statement. He said that means I can't get it, brackets immune, and can't give it. Very nice to know, says the president. Now, the potentially misleading part of that is that, as far as we know, Mr. Trump's doctor has not said that he has tested negative. The Saturday statement, which is the most recent that we have to go on, so it's over 24 hours since his doctors have spoken, but it talked about a decreasing viral load and that by recognised standards, Mr. Trump was no longer considered a transmission risk to others, but no mention of immunity.
Monday sees the start of 4 days of Senate hearings to appoint a new justice for the Supreme Court, and we now know a little more about what the presidential nominee Amy Coney Barrett is likely to say.
Yeah, she's released a statement outlining her approach to these hearings, perhaps aiming to reassure those Democrats who would like to block her confirmation. She said it would be an honour of a lifetime to serve alongside the current 8 justices, and she explained how she approaches cases. She said that as a judge, she sought to reach the result required by the law, whatever her own personal preferences might be. And of course, there's been a lot of focus on her religion as a devout Catholic and statements that she's made in the past opposing abortion. And in her statement, she writes, "When I write an opinion resolving a case, I read every word from the perspective of the losing party. I ask myself how I would view the decision if one of my children was the party that I was ruling against."
Our correspondent in the US, Peter Bowes. Now to the widening ramifications of the conflict over the disputed territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. Azerbaijan has said a missile attack on the country's second city, Ganja, which killed at least 9 people, is a war crime committed by neighbouring Armenia. The government in Yerevan dismissed the claims as an absolute lie. The two countries are supposed to be observing a humanitarian ceasefire in their conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh. But the truce, which began on Saturday, is looking increasingly precarious. Orla Guerin is in Ganja and sent this report.
"Let me see his face," she begs, one last time. She's not alone in this desperate search. We saw remnants of what Baku says was a ballistic missile. It's accusing Armenia of a war crime. Well, this was clearly a civilian target. Apartment blocks, flats where people were living. There's bedding and blankets and mattresses strewn among the rubble here. The attack happened at about 2 a.m. Now, this is supposed to be a ceasefire, but it looks more like all-out war. And what happens next? Is there worse to come on both sides? So is this the end of the truce? I put that question to Hikmet Hajiev, an advisor to the president of Azerbaijan, who came to tour the rubble.
And actually, it's hard to assess the situation. Therefore, currently we are considering the situation. If Armenia continues to attack Azerbaijani civilians, then Azerbaijan will be obliged to take necessary measures against the legitimate military targets.
You are saying that they have fired at you, and you're also saying that you reserve the right to retaliate. So which is it? Are you sticking to the ceasefire, or are you going to retaliate for this attack?
At this stage, we are trying to stick to the ceasefire regime. But of course, if they continue to do so, attacking Azerbaijani civilians, as every nation, we also have a right for self-defense.
As Azerbaijan recovered more of its dead, it too was accused of breaching the ceasefire by shelling civilians on the other side.
Orla Guerin in Azerbaijan. Well, let's hear from the other side that Orla refers to. The BBC has spoken to the Deputy Foreign Minister of the Armenian administration that runs Nagorno-Karabakh, Armin Aleksayan. She insisted its military had not broken the ceasefire.
Our defense forces never target civilians, have never done it, and will never do it. Unlike Azerbaijan, who has, even after the agreement on the ceasefire, had undertaken an attack on the civilians, a very harsh one. I have to tell that Karabakh Defense Forces had an order following the agreement achieved through Russian mediation, that from October 10 at 12 o'clock, there was a command to all the military units to cease the fire, and they continue to observe it.
The Deputy Foreign Minister of the Armenian administration that runs Nagorno-Karabakh, Armin Aleksayan. You're listening to the BBC World Service, and David has the headlines.
The US government's top expert on the pandemic, Anthony Fauci, has said an edited clip of him used in an election ad by President Trump's campaign team is misleading. And Armenia and Azerbaijan have been urged to respect a ceasefire in the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh, with both sides accusing the other of carrying out attacks.
New research shows that the virus responsible for COVID-19 can remain infectious on surfaces such as banknotes, phone screens and stainless steel for up to 28 days. The findings from Australia's National Science Agency suggest SARS-CoV-2 can survive for far longer than thought. But some scientists have already criticised the study, suggesting it is likely to create unnecessary fear. Our reporter Ellie Costello told me more.
We've probably all heard of that previous research which suggested that the virus which makes up COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, can survive for up to 72 hours on surfaces, so things like banknotes, clothing and on glass. But this study says something different. So take this £5 note that I'm holding, James. I brought this £5 note into the studio today. And of course, we're socially distant right now, James, and we're sitting on opposite ends of the studio, so I won't let you touch it. But the Australian National Science Agency says that the virus is very robust, especially on smooth surfaces like this plastic banknote. So they say that if I picked up this banknote today, which I did, and it has SARS-CoV-2 on it, then that virus could survive on this note for up to 28 days, which is a lot longer than what has been suggested before.
I hinted that there's been some criticism of the study. On what grounds?
Well, it's very important to know that this research was carried out in virus-friendly conditions. So it's in a dark, humid room with stable temperatures. The virus may not last that long in the real world. And we already know that light and heat has been shown to kill the virus. As you mentioned, scientists have criticised the study, saying it was causing unnecessary fear to the public because the virus mostly spreads onto surfaces from mucus in coughs and sneezes and even through talking. Now, this experiment didn't use mucus as the vehicle to spread the virus onto the surfaces that were being monitored. So, although possible, it's much less likely to get transmitted through touch. And the rate of transmission depends on lots of factors, including the strength of the strain of the virus and the material of the surface.
So, given all that, what should we take from this research?
Well, obviously, I think it's really important for all of us right now to know how long the virus remains on surfaces so that we can predict its spread and do a better job of protecting ourselves and others around us. I think what is a really interesting point in this study is the finding that the virus persists on stainless steel at colder temperatures, which could explain the outbreaks of COVID-19 at meat processing factories or cold storage facilities. Thousands of people around the world have tested positive after working in abattoirs and meat factories. So it could be partly down to those dark, cold working conditions, but also, and perhaps more importantly, the shouting in those factories. So lots of mucus in the air and little or no social distancing. So ultimately, James, I think the results of this study further highlights the things that we already know that we need to do. So to socially distance as much as possible, to disinfect surfaces, and to keep washing our hands.
Ellie Costello. To Nigeria now, where a controversial anti-robbery brigade is set to be disbanded after days of protests. The police unit, most commonly known by its acronym SARS, or Special Anti-Robbery Squad, has been accused of unlawful arrests, torture and even murder. Demonstrations began after a video posted on social media showed police officers allegedly killing a civilian. The protests spread all over Nigeria and even further afield, and celebrities including footballers and music stars began responding on social media using the hashtag #EndSARS. The BBC's Tim Allman is following the story.
For days the pressure had been building. Protest following protest. Demonstrators with one clear message.
Now, today, not tomorrow, and start now.
Stop killing our boyfriends, stop killing our children, stop. Mothers are crying, stop killing them.
The response from the authorities was similarly direct, regular police deploying water cannon. But then, almost out of the blue, an announcement.
The Special Anti-Robbery Squad of the Nigerian Police, otherwise known as SARS, is hereby dissolved across all formations, the 36 state police commands, and the Federal Capital Territory, where they currently exist.
SARS has a fierce reputation. This video, posted on YouTube, appears to show an officer violently attacking a suspect. The squad's been accused of corruption, taking bribes, making unlawful arrests, torture, and even carrying out extrajudicial killings. Allegations that have been denied. For the protesters, this announcement may seem like good news, but many say they've been here before.
This is not the first time the government have been banned SARS. They are banned. This is third time now. Sam, at the end, they'll soon come up again. So for me, it's not acceptable.
So everything that's trending on Twitter right now has to do with the End SARS movement. So it's really, really exciting to see that Nigerians are gathering together for a good cause.
Nigeria's Inspector General of Police says allegations of abuse will be investigated. Most importantly, he insists the force will be professional and accountable to the people.
Tim Allman reporting. Let's get the latest sports news from Paul Serres.
Rafael Nadal produced one of his finest French Open displays to stun Novak Djokovic and equal Roger Federer's record of 20 Grand Slam men's titles. The BBC's tennis correspondent Russell Fuller was watching.
Sizzling in defence and explosive in attack, Nadal allowed Djokovic just 2 games in the opening 2 sets. Fully fit and hopeful of exploiting the slower autumnal conditions, Djokovic did not win a single game in the first set and later congratulated Nadal for completely outplaying him. This is the 4th time Nadal has won the tournament without dropping a set, and he now has 100 match wins at Roland Garros. Federer has already taken to social media to offer his congratulations and hope that 20 Grand Slams is just another step on the continuing journey for them both.
Plans for radical reforms of English football, known as Project Big Picture, have been revealed. Under the proposals led by Liverpool and Manchester United, the English top flight would be cut to 18 teams, with the EFL Cup and the Community Shield being scrapped. The government, supporters groups and the Premier League have all released statements criticising the plans, but the EFL chairman Rick Parry has endorsed the proposals. On the pitch, England beat the world's top-ranked team Belgium in the UEFA Nations League on Sunday. Correspondent John Murray was at Wembley.
It was not the most flowing of England performances, but what it was a victory against the #1 ranked team in the world from 1-0 down with half-time approaching. Belgium took the lead after they'd taken charge of the match. With just over a quarter of an hour gone, Dias slide in on Lukaku conceded a penalty from which Lukaku himself scored. But England got back into it with a penalty of their own. Captain Jordan Henderson going down after feeling Meunier's hand on his shoulder. Newly honoured MBE Marcus Rashford made it 1-1 from the spot. And in a closely contested second half, one goal was enough to win it. Wing-backs Alexander-Arnold and Trippier combining to set up Mason Mount, whose deflected shot in off Alderweireld was the match winner.
Reigning world champion Lewis Hamilton equalled the all-time record for career Formula One victories by winning the Eiffel Grand Prix. And Tyrrell Hatton won the PGA Championship at Wentworth by 4 strokes from France's Victor Perez. And the Los Angeles Lakers are the NBA champions. They beat the Miami Heat 106 points to 93 in Game 6 of the finals to win the series 4-2 and take the title for the first time in a decade.
Paul Serres. Now, of all the sectors affected by the coronavirus, few have been hit harder than international travel. Thailand is one of the places feeling that pain. The country's tourism industry accounted for roughly a fifth of its economy before the pandemic. Jonathan Head visited the Koh Phangan Island, which hosts the famous monthly full moon party.
This was one of the world's most famous beaches, with an equally famous party. Hat Rin on Thailand's Koh Phangan used to be an essential stop on every backpacker's itinerary. But something so wild, so crowded, so dependent on mass travel was never going to survive COVID-19. Like a tsunami, it crashed and everything fell with it, says Naramit Somwong, who rents out motorbikes. Look around you. There's no income here anymore.
Right now, it's full moon again, and until COVID-19 kept all the tourists away, by this time the beach would have been filling up, the DJs cranking up their music, and hundreds of businesses doing well. There were plenty of jobs and profits, nearly all of them now gone. But the people who live on this lovely island are now wondering, whenever international travel starts up again, whether they might not do it differently next time.
There's a lot less pollution now, though these rubbish volunteers still find plenty left on the beach, even 6 months after the parties stopped. It's a chance for Koh Phangan's natural environment to recover.
We live here, we have our family here.
And businesses, foreign and locally owned, are now discussing a greener future for the island economy.
But there's also many other things that people can see on the island, and we want to promote
one that's focused on longer stays, on a greater sense of community.
We'll do it in a kind of ecologically conscious way as well.
Some of the island's residents have now started a community garden to showcase this new, less material spirit. The vegetables grown here are to help those who've lost their jobs to the COVID crisis. At the Hat Rin resort his family's owned for 40 years, Mark Panyawinans is also having a rethink.
COVID is really like sort of a reset button right now. At some point the full moon party is going to fail anyway, and it just so happens so that COVID really pushed that hard reset button.
Like other resorts, Mark is now relying on a smaller number of long-staying visitors who value a slower lifestyle. So today, where once young revellers from across the globe partied hard until dawn, there are families eating and playing around a campfire. It's a less profitable, but surely more sustainable way of exploiting this very special island.
Jonathan Head reporting. Now, David has some other stories from our news desk.
The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization says more than 9 million people in Sudan, almost a quarter of the population, are in need of urgent assistance as a result of severe flooding. In an interview with the BBC, the FAO representative in Khartoum said the country's agriculture sector had been devastated by the floods, which have destroyed 3 million hectares of farmland and over 1 million tonnes of grain. In recent months, more than 100 people have died in the floods, which have also damaged fruit crops that were being grown for for export. Sudan is also facing an economic crisis with severe fuel shortages. Turkey says it will allow a ship that has been conducting research into oil and gas deposits in the Mediterranean to continue with its work, threatening to reignite a row with Greece over energy rights. Ankara says for the next 10 days, the Oruç Reis will conduct seismic research in the eastern Mediterranean, including the waters south of the Greek island of Castellorizo. The governing Fidesz party of the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has held on to its two-thirds majority in parliament after narrowly winning an important by-election in the northeast of the country. The main opposition parties had united under a single candidate, Laszlo Biro, to try to break Mr Orbán's 10-year hold on power. Mr Biro won 46% of the vote. The Fidesz candidate, Zofia Konch, finished with 51%. And media reports say a Canadian tourist has returned artefacts she stole from the ancient site of Pompeii after claiming they'd given her bad luck. The 36-year-old woman, who was only identified as Nicole, sent a package of the relics to a local travel agent in Campania in Italy. The owner of the travel agency turned them over to police. It's unclear whether any charges will be brought against the tourist.
David, thank you. The British star Ed Sheeran famously sang about a Galway girl, and now a girl from another part of Ireland is celebrating after being sent a special gift by the singer. The newsroom's Charlotte Gallagher takes up the story.
Baby, I just wanna dance with my pretty little Galway girl. You're my pretty little Galway girl.
10-year-old Lily O'Brien from Sligo is a big fan of Ed Sheeran. Back in May, when Irish schools were closed because of COVID, she wrote a letter to the star, thanking him for the charity work he'd done in Africa. Even finding his address was a challenge.
I went on my iPad and Googled it, but his address didn't come up. But all it came up is, he lived in London, so I wrote Ed Sheeran, singer of the Galway Girl, London.
Months went by and Lily hadn't received a reply. Until last week, that is, when a parcel addressed to the schoolgirl arrived. Inside, a custom-made acoustic guitar sent by Sheeran. Lily's mum, Amanda, said the family nearly died when they saw what the singer had sent. She added that Lily has dyslexia, and writing the letter and getting the gift had been a huge boost.
Charlotte Gallagher reporting. I imagine the singer's going to be getting quite a few more letters in the next few weeks. A reminder of our main news. The US government's top expert on the coronavirus pandemic, Anthony Fauci, has said an edited clip of him used in an election ad by President Trump's campaign team is misleading. And you can download our latest global news podcast at bbcworldservice.com. But from me and the newsroom team, for now, goodbye.